had to we in the Department of Transportation with our colleagues undertook a study of the whole downtown transportation system. And as you will hear later this evening, Santa Clara Street was one of the critical priorities that really emerged. That is not a surprise to me. I live within a block of Santa Clara Street. And it's kind of interesting. I've had a lot of life experiences on or near Santa Clara Street. I went to St. Patrick's Elementary School. My children went to Horace Mann Elementary School. Again, I live on 14th Street. Now you all know where I live. Right off of Santa Clara Street. So we spend a lot of time, traversing this area. I even, before I worked here, because otherwise it's weird, had my wedding reception here at San Jose City Hall. So like this Santa Clara Street is a very familiar location, probably for many of us, certainly for myself. And it has its bright spots and it has its rough spots. And so we're really excited for the opportunity to figure out, how can Santa Clara Street be the place that we all want to go to instead of all going away from, right? So that's my personal interest, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to our project manager and team, starting with Eric Eidlin. And those of us who work in the Department of Transportation who can be resources afterwards, please raise your hand. Wilson, Colin, Nick, and then we have Julie, who will introduce herself from our consulting team as well. So thank you again for attending and enjoy. Thanks in advance for all your feedback.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Again, Eric Eidlin. I lead this project with my fine colleague, Nick Fry, in the front row here. All right, so we're going to give you a bit of an overview. Jess gave you a bit of the context, how this project came to be. And then I'm going to turn it over to Julie of Site Lab, who's going to run us through the design alternatives. Okay. And it is not advancing. There we go. Okay. We also have done a fair amount of community engagement, Nick and I especially in the past, well, really since the summer, but this past 10 days has been quite a bit. Saw many of you today, as a matter of fact, at the farmer's market. Okay, so Jess already talked about this, called for in the downtown transportation plan, which actually I led with Wilson Tam, who's there in the back. And so of the 4 big moves that plan called for, it was Santa Clara Street and the light rail realignment project. Some of you may know about that are really moving forward right now. In the downtown transportation plan, we also did a lot of this community engagement for that. We heard from many of you a lot of strong opinions about Santa Clara Street. Overall, there wasn't a lot of satisfaction. People didn't feel like it was the proud, first address in San Jose that, according to the street's grid, it sort of is like it's the street you end up on if you're going, from Diridon to downtown, for example. It was certainly my first experience in San Jose. So anyway, a sense that we need to improve that. When we also were working on this downtown transportation plan, we were planning for downtown West and a lot more people in that area. So it really started, how do we get more people down the street? But then many of us also said that, that's not going to be enough. We don't just want, fast vehicles just storming down the street and then empty storefronts. No, we need to think about the whole thing together. So really, that became a key, underpinning of this project, this multidisciplinary approach. So we're working closely with our Department of Economic Development, with the downtown businesses and businesses all along the corridor. Okay, so the corridor that we're looking at, in some ways it's sort of ironic. The central part, you might say the most important part of the street, has been the least studied. So we really felt it was timely to look at this. So we're looking really at the corridor from where it becomes Diridon Station, where it changes from the Alameda to Santa Clara Street in the west, through Diridon Station SAP Center under 87, all the way in the east to Coyote Creek, 17th Street. We see roughly 3 different zones. So in the west, we say roughly from Diridon Station to Almaden Boulevard. So that's the first, where it's, a little bit more There are more park spaces. There's the event center. Then we get into the downtown core with this more historic, urban fabric, zero lot line in many cases, meaning, not big setbacks from the front building to the sidewalk. And then in the east, we have, somewhat lower density residential and business beginning, just east of here at City Hall. In terms of the process, we started this project a little over a year ago. We've spoken with many of you. We did existing conditions work on existing transportation assets. And we've been working really, I'd say, beginning this summer at looking at different alternatives, starting just with concepts for the street as a whole. And now tonight we're showing to you some complete packages. Julie will tell you more. These aren't intended as final proposals, one or two, but to help you think through, what's the best combination of elements for the street. With this feedback tonight, we're gonna refine an option and move toward one option that we'll bring back to you early next year. Okay. I think I've already touched on this somewhat, but as I said, this is a multidisciplinary project. So, mobility is a given. The street doesn't work very well. We often say it's trying to do too many things and doesn't do any of them very well. That said, it does need to improve mobility. It needs to be easier to get around, and it has to be a more organized street. But it shouldn't do that at the expense of the economy, which means it needs to be a great place for people to spend time. And it's often a tension right there. You can't have, you don't have great cafes beside a freeway, it's just not a pleasant. So, there's this relationship between vehicle speed and how pleasant the environment is. And then, as I mentioned, it's the logical east-west street when you come to downtown. So it is really an iconic, it's the first impression many people have of the city. So we wanted to reflect that. And so we're looking at some of the, elements, aesthetics, so on, that we want to reinforce through this project. Okay. So I've already talked to many of you. We've gotten many opinions, strong opinions in many cases. Through this project, we're trying to address as many of these as possible. However, we have limited space. So this is a street section from downtown, 97 feet from building to building. So we likely can't do everything that everyone wants, but just to give you a sense of some of the issues. So in many cases, we have accessibility issues. The curb ramps aren't, ADA compliant. We often hear the tree canopy is inconsistent, right? Especially in the summer, you notice that on hot days. You'll go down one block and there are nice trees, and then the next one you're just in the blazing sun. And that's not comfortable. People want the street to work better, to make it easier to close for special events. We've seen a lot of those. There's a desire for dedicated bus lanes, or at least ways to move the buses more quickly. And then a really strong one is, to the point I've been making about how the street needs to welcome people, a place to be, wider sidewalks for dining, as well as just to reduce the clutter on the sidewalk. So these are some fundamental things that we are looking to do across the corridor based on the feedback we've received. So generally, we want to reallocate some of the vehicle space to walking and transit. And we're doing that in part by, taking over largely space in the curb lane. Also, in many cases, dedicated left turn pockets. So it'll be, we would restrict left turn movements in some cases. We're looking at the street as we want to make it vital for really 18 hours of the day, maybe not, 2 a.m., but, 18 hours of the day probably. And to think about that. So in our design, can we accommodate those various activities? As I've already mentioned, fill in gaps in the tree canopy, and include accessible design features. And then this is really important. This is not something that Julie and her team are going to fully design. We're going to come up with a 10% street design plan as a result of this effort. But another big piece of feedback we've gotten is that there are bright spots along the street. Jess mentioned this a bit. But then there are sort of less active spots between them. So how can we maintain visual interest along the corridor? So we've identified also a number of spots along the corridor that are existing assets, whether it's, you see San Pedro Square here, or right close to there, the Almaden Triangle. We think that's a place that's sort of underutilized. Could we not do something great there and, help draw people along the street, maintain their interest? Okay. So those are not things we're going to design as part of this project, but we're going to seed future projects is our hope through this plan. So we'll include suggestions on how to move forward with these things. Okay, and I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to show us the concepts. Oh, sorry. I think we've talked enough about the feedback, but these are just the four basic categories.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Great question.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Julie Gwendo. I am the Director of Landscape Planning at Site Lab Urban Studio. We are a planning and urban design firm. We've worked in San Jose in other capacities. So this is bringing us here again after some of our work at 28th Street Little Portugal and our work at Downtown West. And so it's really nice to be here again. The rest of our team, just to acknowledge them, Francisca's here from Fair and Piers. There's our transportation team members. We also have HD Harvey, their local landscape architects, fantastic community members, nonprofit here called Art Builds Community. Some of you might be familiar with them, helping us with the art infiltration kind of infusion on the project. And then TBD Consultant is helping us with some of the costing measures. So just to kind of go through a little bit on who those are. So I think some of you had a chance to look at our boards here physically when you first arrived, but I'm going to go through two concepts, kind of where we are right now. We've gone through many ideas and many concepts about what Santa Clara Street should be, what makes this iconically San Jose, what makes it a place you want to be, what makes it a place you want to bring others. We just talked about like, where do I bring visitors? And so thinking about those things. So the two concepts are called Spark and Mosaic. I'll go through Spark first and then Mosaic. And so after we go through the concepts, we're going to have some open time for questions. So hold your questions and we'll give space for those. So our first concept, Spark, is really about energy and dynamicism and flexibility, kind of creating a series of bright moments, just as Eric mentioned, through all these special spots that we're seeing along Santa Clara Street. How are we celebrating those and bringing them through potential change through different times of the day, different times of the week, and also different seasons? This is a diagram that we put together through some of our due diligence work, looking at existing conditions here on Santa Clara Street. And as you can see from this diagram, there's kind of long distances between some of these highlighted moments. And also, they're mostly pulled off of Santa Clara Street. So the idea with Spark especially is to how are we bringing the energy from all of these existing moments that are gathering this kind of concentration of energy, both people, economics, social investment, and how are we bringing that onto Santa Clara Street? Here is a diagram of some work that we did with Downtown West, but we're talking here about the flexibility and what are these flex zones? How are we going to develop those? Could they be a food truck? Could they be a really great parklet? Are they an improved accessible bus stop? So there's many options of what these bright spots could be along Santa Clara Street. I'm going to go through just a couple elements. These are design elements of what these flexible platforms can be made up of. We know there's an initiative already happening in San Jose for pre-approved parklets. So really, this is kind of still in process, but having something that businesses would be able to use as adjustable modular systems that are already approved. They're not going to go through a process each time through permitting of what this can be. These are things that they would be able to choose off the shelf, so to speak, and adapt as needed. And these are able to improve that the curb isn't really a barrier here, but it's an extension of the businesses. And in adjacent to those kind of more fixed furnishings, we would have movable furnishings. So we talked about this Spark concept being about adaptability. And so if you're going to have coffee with your friends in the morning, kind of gathering those movable seats around and seeing what those can be, to a potential event in the afternoon, or the businesses could use them as cafe seating as well. So really kind of having both of those furnishing and seating to be used in different ways. Third, we're thinking about lighting and how can we bring this dynamic and programmable element that just really highlights and creates cohesiveness along the corridor to these schemes. Obviously, this can be brought into both scheme. On the right here, you'll see the existing lights along Santa Clara Street. And on the left, this is an example from Madrid. So there's many practicalities through this that we're beginning to think through with fire and all of those pieces, but really being able to string something from building face to building face, or be it street light to street light, with accessibility to the buildings, but really creating iconic beauty and color and light all the way down the corridor. And last, we're going to talk a little bit here about planting. Eric mentioned, how are we looking at the canopy? So you'll see in Mosaic, our next scheme that I'll go through, talks more about a linear concept for planting and kind of linear park that will lead you through. And here we're going to look at more consolidated, unique plantings that would be paired with these adaptable programmatic spaces. This is just a quick corridor wide plan. You could see potentially how these different bright spots along Spark could be adapted based on the use of this portion of the corridor, whether that be adjacencies to the Guadalupe River Park, whether that be at the historic core, or really neighborhood serving in the East Village, that they would change depending on what the uses are along the street. Here's our section. So Santa Clara Street is 97 feet wide. Currently, what you can see on the bottom, it shows the existing curb. There's about 16 feet of sidewalk on each side. What we are looking to do is increase the sidewalk zone into the street. So moving the curb into the street, having dedicated travel lanes and transit lanes, and these flex zones that at sometimes, like we mentioned earlier, would be a bus stop. Sometimes they would be an extension of the local business. Sometimes they would be an area to plant a tree. Currently, there is some challenges planting trees adjacent to businesses because there's basements and a lot of infrastructure that goes underneath. So this is kind of pulling the sidewalk out so you could have more opportunities for these types of activities. This is 7th Street. You're all familiar with this probably. We've done a few little vignettes, just taking the pieces that we've looked at already and like, what could this be? How could we imagine this if we're adding in lighting, special furnishings, great adaptable parklets, and potentially some unique paving to bring you through. Yeah. That's a possibility for sure. It's a great point. I think it's something to consider for sure. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to Mosaic. Mosaic is our concept that we're really thinking is about rooted in history and culture and the celebration of what can be here in San Jose, and the idea that we would be celebrating the cultural communities of San Jose, be that bringing back all the way from our indigenous tribes to the local immigrant community, and even things like the incredible murals that we have all up and down San Jose. How are we bringing those into celebration of the street and making more pointed efforts to include those in these different schemes? And then also even the lowrider culture. So how are we bringing everybody down the street and celebrating that? And there's much more. This is just a few. So kind of thinking about leaping from these cultural communities to the linear park, and the idea that we are creating a canvas through planting and a celebration of the landscape through these spaces for gathering, art, community, strolling with shade and really nice new materials kind of underfoot. So we're creating a new space for these businesses and then also for tourists and locals alike. Here is just thinking about the importance of the landscape as a storyteller. And could we have something like an Aloni garden or specifics of native plants that are local to Northern California? How are we using plants for stormwater? So it's a teaching option as well for sustainability. That would happen in either scheme, but really using planting to connect the entire corridor from one side to the other. As we mentioned, fantastic art. So how can that be brought in and added to this canvas of expression for the linear landscape? And another really fun element, which I think is something important to think about, is seating. Seating, lighting. How can we use color in something that is potentially created especially for San Jose, that then becomes this iconic moment? You kind of come out of the BART station eventually and you would say, I know I've landed here because of this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be red. This is an example from London, but really what speaks to San Jose and something that would give it this new iconic color. Here's a corridor-wide plan. So one thing that's really interesting that we've looked at, I think first we thought, okay, we're going to have the linear park. Would we have it along the south side going through the whole corridor? And really, when you start to dissect and look at the street, that doesn't make sense. You would really want it in some places on the north and some places on the south based on the different uses and potential uses that will come in the future. This is a first stab at what that might look like. There's a lot of kind of discussion and obviously equity things about where this would be placed. But really, it wouldn't make sense in some places to have it on the north or south. So this is a piece here that when we're looking along the section, that you would also be able to see density of trees on each side, which is great.
Sorry, I just wanted to point, so make that a little more concrete. So for example, here you see where it's orange. So this is San Pedro Square. So we want to give more space to San Pedro Square, people spilling out there. Over here, sorry, this is south. So over here, San Pedro Square on the north. Over here, City Hall, we want to tie into that. So we flip to the south.
Thanks, Eric. Again, we have our section here, our 97 feet. So you can see we're not decreasing the sidewalk at all on the side where there isn't the linear park, but we're really expanding it on the linear park side. We're giving ourselves almost over 30 feet. So we're expanding the existing curb there by almost 17 feet. And then if you include the loading zone, which at times would be parking and loading and other times can be a continuation of the park. And again, we have the travel lane. So the vignette that we've done here is at Almaden because we already have kind of that green patch there on the corner. So if you think about extending that through the linear park and really using color and texture for what that may be. And, you know, these are artist renderings. These are impressions. These are just for inspiration. So you can imagine not all these pieces would be exactly like this by any way, but the idea that there is some great new textured colored ground plane to represent the kind of cultural communities, having a great, interesting crosswalk and some furnishings that would carry through. And really this idea, if we have the linear park, can we bring some of these businesses that are inside outside? Can we add kiosks that are currently in the buildings that are drawing people away from the street and come into the street more? So it's part of this idea as well. Yeah, and so we're kind of like coming to the end here of explaining the two schemes. I think most of you have probably seen these on the board, and I really encourage you after a comment period, please come up and add some comments to our boards. We'd love to hear what are the stories you want to hear. What things would you like to see pop up with Spark? What scheme really resonates with you more, resonates with those in San Jose? So just really at this point, we are not looking to choose an exact scheme, as Eric mentioned early on. The idea here is with these two schemes, concentrating on what's the look and feel, what's going to feel like the right thing that's going to make everyone here proud to be arriving on the street, that we can be able to turn around that commentary that Santa Clara Street is the least favorite street in San Jose. And, you know, I think there's benefits to both of these, one being symmetrical, one being asymmetrical, one really depending on the businesses and flexibility, and the other creating an iconic corridor through the street that doesn't really depend on the businesses, that cares more about a promenade and a place to be. So I'll leave it there and we can kind of move on to some questions. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Vicki Harrison. I live in Paseo Plaza downtown. Question for you. During the pandemic, the bus corridor on San Fernando was kind of removed, and stops, accessible stops were created and then taken down, and buses were moved to Santa Clara Street. So now I'm wondering, since Santa Clara Street is the one street currently with two traffic lanes in both directions, are you considering moving anything back to San Fernando or north to St. James, or where are you imagining putting the traffic that's currently on Santa Clara Street?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, you know, one of the most interesting pieces of information we gathered in our existing conditions work was that, you know, we actually started this process thinking, oh, this is a major thoroughfare, everyone is driving through. We actually learned that 85% of the people on Santa Clara Street are driving to destinations right here in downtown. So that gave us a little bit of confidence that, you know, the through function is somewhat less important than we thought. Of course, we're doing more in Francisca. We have Francisca here too from our transportation team. We're looking at this very carefully. But at this stage, it's a little early. I don't know, Jess, if you want to.
Well, I was only going to add, so VTA is partially here tonight with Adriano with the BART project, but also part of our core team for this project. And so specific to the question of buses, around that time that you were referencing right before the pandemic, VTA really looked hard at their overall network, and they made some core changes to try to have more of the lines concentrated so that as a passenger, you could go to one place and easily access almost all the lines that you wanted. And so that was a key part of that decision to concentrate on Santa Clara Street. And so I think, you know, the timing is such that that was their move. And that also helps with people who are transferring from one bus line to another. So I don't want to overly speak for VTA because they're not here in that capacity tonight. But that is still kind of how the bus routes get the most people to and from the most places, is to concentrate the bus lines on Santa Clara Street. So we don't believe they have any plans to change that from what it is at this point. Lots of questions. Nick, why don't you stay on this side and I'll come on this side. I did see Richard's hand first, so I'm going to go to Richard.
Thank you. Hi, Richard Agiloni. I've lived downtown most of my life, and I've been on South 12th for the last 25. 6, 7 years ago, we had a whole bunch of meetings. We attended a bunch of meetings when Councilmember Perales was around, and it was all about 7th to 17th, and the city was going to work with all the developers and their community and try to get all these mixed-use buildings in place. And we went to all these meetings, and like 7, 8 years later, I think there's one that's been completed and a lot of signs up and a lot of conversations. And with all due respect to your work and your creative energy, I feel like you're putting the cart before the horse. I feel like if the city supported developers to build those projects, the people, the revenue, everything would be, this stuff would all be more organic than being forced on an empty Santa Clara Street. Sorry.
Thank you. Nick can take somebody on that side, but I will say, Richard, it's such a good point. And one of the things we honestly struggle with is when a new development project comes in and we have the opportunity to build out the streetscape that is desired, we don't have, we literally don't know where to tell them to put the curb, right? And so this kind of effort can really assist for when the market is, sufficient to kind of get more of those projects going. That is one of the driving factors in kind of doing this work. But your point is very fair.
I'll say one more thing about that quickly. That I think that's a great comment. And I think some of the ambition here is kind of to think beyond that even, and what are the improvements that can be made corridor wide, and thinking about identity and the iconic nature of the street, that it can become a great street and a great boulevard. And so I think having that energy from the development is of course needed and so important, but like, how do we begin to think holistically about this street from end to end? So I think that's part of it as well.
Got 2 over here and 2 right here. Nick, you want to
maybe
take
do one side then the other, and
Yeah,
yeah.
great.
My name's Carol Savoy. And I live on 10th Street, and I've been there for 30 years. And I also was present in all the Brown Act meetings for City Hall, as it took out a corner of my neighborhood. 2 things. One is, well, I should leave my cynicism to myself. Okay. So the second one is parking. As we build more developments, the city has deigned that we shall not have a car for every person, or even, I think, 0.7 cars for every person. So I've noticed none of this has any parking. And I live on 10th, and sometimes I have to drive to that building right there because the weather's bad. I'm not going to walk in it. So if it's a boulevard, if it's like, does it have parking?
So the answer to that, and David, if we've had many conversations with David here. Okay, so the answer is it's different for different parts of the corridor. In the east, I think there are opportunities for replacing some of this parking potentially on some of the side streets, which are very wide. For example, I know 9th Street, for example, is quite wide. So maybe you reconfigure the space, put in diagonal parking and gain a lot. That's an option over there as an example. Downtown, it's tough, we can't do everything everyone's asking of us and, maintain parking on the street. We know from our discussions with our colleagues who manage parking that there is, I know not everybody likes to go in a garage, but there's a lot of available capacity in our 3 downtown garages, right? A lot of capacity, they never, post-pandemic, do not surpass 55%. So that's the most, that's for the Market Street garage. So, it may be a little inconvenient for people, but we also can't provide the nice spaces that many in the community are asking of us by maintaining, what is I'm not, saying it's not an important consideration, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not the most important consideration that we're hearing from the community. That's sort of our take on it.
Okay, I live in Negley Park down over by the creek, and been there for almost 40 years. One of the observations is that Santa Clara Street is interesting that you're ending at quite a creek, but it should be noted in your designs that Santa Clara is only one of 4 streets that actually crosses Coyote Creek. So the connection between the east and the west side of San Jose, which becomes very critical on certain events during the year, not the least of which is Viva Calle and also Cinco de Mayo and the others, is that whatever you do on Santa Clara Street has a direct and immediate impact on the other three crossings, which are all single lane neighborhood streets. And so we have had in the past some really crazy situations, and when they block Santa Clara Street, so anything that stops Santa Clara Street forces a massive amount of traffic north onto Julian and south into William Street and to and San Antonio, where it's literally a one lane, practically a one lane crossing. And so in your design and anything you do that's going to choke Santa Clara at any point, recognize the impact on the neighborhoods is going to be immediate and pretty drastic.
Another quick mention. So the sections we showed here, those are the downtown core where it's tightest. In the east, in the west, we do have a little more space to play with also, I should mention.
Is density considered as part of this? Because I've been in a number of other studies around on Santa Clara Street, and they included density as part of the overall discussion.
So, you know, I think I understand. So we're doing a streetscape project that is really to better equip the street for a future that is denser. If that's, it's not a land use plan. We're you know, thinking about the land use plans that are in place and trying to equip the street to better accommodate that development. Yeah.
Hi, I'm April. I live in San Jose, near the Rose Garden, but I travel here by bus along Santa Clara Street, and I love this plan. I have gone shopping on Santa Clara Street before in downtown, and it's not a great pedestrian experience, obviously. So seeing Spark and Mosaic, I mean, this is great. I would love to walk down the Mosaic path or see the parklets all along Spark. But one thing that I do want to point out is I'm wondering if there are any considerations for bike racks. Oftentimes when I go downtown, I'll be biking, easiest way for me to get there. And sometimes I just can't find anywhere to park my bike, not a bike rack for an entire block. And if we want like a lot of people to be able to come here, I think just one or two bike racks per block could go a long way to enabling people to park here and then stroll the Spark or Mosaic.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's definitely something we're going to include in the plan. Another piece, you know, as we've emphasized, we don't have a lot of space in many of these places. So as part of that, we also want to have it coordinated and consolidated, right? So if we have a bus stop, you know, we want to make sure it's lined up efficiently with those bike racks so that we're not encroaching on the 8 feet. I don't know if you noticed in the we say we want at least 8 feet of clear space for pedestrians to go through. So so we're thinking about all those things together, but absolutely very important.
Yeah, just I really like the Mosaic design and I guess the Spark design, but not as much. It's nice to be able to be a pedestrians on Santa Clara and not have to worry too much about getting killed by cars. I think some concerns I have with the Spark and also with Mosaic is like, if you're going to do Spark, who's going to manage what space getting used as the flex? Is the city going to use DOT for that? Is a whole separate department? Are we going to establish a Santa Clara Street HOA for everybody that's affected by the flex situation? And then the other one about Mosaic is that I guess this also tying with parking. There are, in your section from Stairdon all the way to Coyote Creek, that's about 2 miles. And in this 2 miles, there are more than 20 cross streets. So you have one cross street every 0.1 mile. We're not even talking like a quarter mile. We're talking 0.1 miles. So it doesn't make sense to me why you would want to put parking on Santa Clara Street, except in the residential area where people need to park in front of their house, because 0.1 mile is like nothing for a delivery driver to deliver packages or whatever they need to do. So there doesn't seem to be a need for that on this corridor. And for that also plays into your linear park situation, because now you need to prioritize the crossing at every intersection with a linear park. I would love to see the linear park, but I would also love to know that like we're not going to try to cross the linear park with cross streets every 20 step, because that's 0.1 mile. And then we got to wait 3 minutes for a car. So that's not really a park. That's more like a collection of 20 something parks.
Let me quickly respond, and then I don't know, Julie, if you want to say anything about the crossing the linear park, but the definitely that what you're bringing up with the managed, so the mosaic, there's no question that is a heavier, it's a bigger move, and it is a bigger commitment for management, not just management, but also I understand also programming. When you're thinking about manage, how's that space used? How's it managed? Do we have extra groundworks contract, or there are many examples. And then as far as, as you're talking, also a big issue that we barely talked about is loading. So in our engagement, we've talked to Uber drivers, and they talk about how chaotic it is and unsafe to pick people up. So that is something that is not going away, right? So that is also part of our thinking, what we need to accommodate with the curb. You want to say anything about crossing the linear park?
I mean, I think that's a great point about the crossing. I think if you think about crossing across Santa Clara, we're decreasing the cross distance, which is great, but what you're talking about is a frequency. So that wouldn't change, that wouldn't change. Well, that's clear. I think the environment that you get to be in terms of what the material is and the trees is going to give you a different experience, but you're correct that you would still have to cross between each of those sections. Yeah.
Hi there. My name's Brent. I work at the VTA as a TOD project manager, but tonight I'm here as a local resident. I live across the street in Mira, so this was very convenient to come to. I apologize for showing up rather late, but very excited about the work and the extensive work that you guys have done here. I popped in at the Diridon station and I saw a quick I got like a brief snapshot of what the work that you were doing while I was taking a train up. So it's very exciting to see the work that's happening on this as a main boulevard. Being a resident in Miro, I recently saw the closure of Rolati. And in the article, I think it was on Mercury News, it was about the reduction of, or not enough foot traffic being in our neighborhood. I heard some comments tonight about how we should wait for the development to come before we kind of implement these types of initiatives. I think it's a good thing that we bring on some of these plans and how we can tie that with development, because if we don't have that foot traffic, some of these businesses that are coming in with these new developments may not have enough customers to even keep them alive and afloat. So I just wanted to quickly remark on that and just say how important this is, that we continue this conversation and keep these plans in motion and engage the community. And I'm really excited about that effort. I think in another perspective too, from my position in work, I see the tie-in with some of these plans with affordable housing, and how with different grant funding like ASIC, you can tie in different community initiatives in terms of bike pedestrian improvements, and then tie that in with the creation of affordable housing. And so I don't know if you've considered ASIC as like a funding source for some future implementation rounds, but I would implore the panel to explore that. Thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great comment. I think what you're alluding to is this first mover dilemma in terms of like who's going to come there and how are they coming there? It's this chicken and egg situation, and kind of what kind of development are we doing and how are we improving this? And each of these schemes would do that in different ways. But I think it's such an important point in how we're bringing energy to downtown and the streets. And if we're creating it, then do the businesses come, or are we depending on the businesses? And I think both of these schemes do that in a different way. And it's a really good point.
Yeah, I'll just add. So yeah, many chickens and eggs in this on this project. Right, and we work for the Department of Transportation. I think you're right. We need to put forward a vision. We're not going to attract any funding unless we put forward a vision that we've articulated and spelled out and sort of provided a bit of a roadmap about how it can happen. But this goes to the question asked earlier about the development. We don't control that, but we certainly can provide a bit of a platform where, yeah, maybe you see these photos here. maybe this starts to make it more appealing for one business to come in. And then, hopefully there's a bit of a snowball effect. Sorry for the non-California analogy, but.
Hi, my name's Anne and I live near 3rd and Williams. And I guess just also for context, me and my girlfriend, like we moved to downtown because we want to well, she still has her car, but I want to be able to like walk and bike more and stuff like that. And so I'm really excited to see these kind of city initiatives where we are really like trying to prioritize that like walking and biking experience. And I guess maybe just a small follow-up question on the like crossings, because I could see this like as someone who like typically will leave my house on 3rd and then walk to Santa Clara, but maybe I'll like walk to the Sharks game or something like that. Like on those crossings, will there also be like, because sometimes I see around like sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, but there's a pedestrian like walk ones where you get to push the button and then it kind of like stops the cars for you, or is it like, or maybe you haven't decided that yet, but that's something maybe to think about, is like whether pedestrians have priority at the crossings, and because that might make it more comfortable.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think generally one of our biggest challenges, probably all of you have had the experience of trying to cross some of our downtown streets, like at Almaden Boulevard, right? And you can juxtapose that exactly with crossing at First Street, right? And so we have some big challenges with signal timing, making sure that those intersections are safe for people of all speeds, right? And so that is what our signal timing is set for. When we are able to kind of bring in the curbs even just a little bit, it can really help us shorten the signal timing requirements and make the crossings easier and faster for all people, but especially as a pedestrian, when you're sitting there, you're like, I've really been here for 3 minutes. I'm ready to walk now. And yeah, right. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So I think that is something that goes into kind of all of these projects, is trying to think about, what is the most vulnerable user and what is their experience, and how do we kind of change the intersection so that it works better for them and for everybody else. All right. I see Alan has the mic, and then I'll pass.
So one of the things my name is Alan Williams, 12th Street, close to Santa Clara. I've been involved in a number of the quick strike bike lane projects, and one of the things that frustrated me was the lack of maintenance that came with that. There's really no consideration from what I saw. Maybe there was something later, but is that there's no consideration for additional maintenance, additional people, equipment to keep that clean. And so maybe this project just want to make sure that maintenance is also being considered. I mean, I love either one of these designs, right? But there's lots of new chairs that need to be cleaned, lots of landscape that need to be cleaned, garbage to be picked up and such. It's not, I don't want to see this taken out of hide from the existing DOT or related, budget. It's got to have some increase in that. That's got to be part of the programming.
Yeah, maintenance is key consideration. We'll address that in the plan.
Oh, I'm I'm Jared. I live on Market and Santa Clara Street, and I just moved here from downtown. I used to live in Cambrian Park, and I moved to downtown. Love what you're doing with the linear park. I think a lot of younger people do want to have a robust urban scene in downtown. I think something a lot of us are concerned about is kind of like safety, not just physical safety, but psychological safety. And a lot of my friends do not feel safe going down Santa Clara. I think there's a lot of elements there. And so if we are going to bring a park structure, how are we also going to ensure that people can enjoy the park safely and the vibes are good?
It probably, actually, I have here a summary of everything we've heard. And this was, number one, the comments, so that we, this is all for naught if we can't make the streets safe and inviting and clean. So that is also something we're addressing in the plan. There are social issues that are clearly bigger than our project. That's it. It's a multidisciplinary project. So we are going to specifically tie into efforts by others, reference them in the smartest way possible. But yeah, I mean, those are very important issues you're raising.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go. Wait, I guess it's my turn. I'm sorry. I'm Michael Sullivan. I live on 8th Street, and I walked here, as a matter of fact. So the two things I wanted to ask is, will the buses have priority in the sense that not just having their own dedicated lane, but can we program the lights to turn green for the buses so they can always have the easiest time getting through all the intersections?
Yeah, queue jump, we call that. Yeah, that's definitely a number of those management tricks, tools that we're going to use as well. Yeah, in addition to the physical design. Yeah.
Okay. And just to make a comment too, I know I don't want to be a naysayer because I love plants. I love native California plants. I have some in my backyard. And I love the idea of softening all the concrete that's downtown. However, I know too that the Parks Department is having some financial issues in keeping up with all the parks. Would this be a priority on their list in order to, make sure that it's, attracting people?
Yeah, I think well, one thing is, maintenance has come up from all three of you, and it is actually a huge deal, right? We don't want to constrain good ideas by just taking them off the table because they are expensive. But we will be, we don't have funding to maintain this today. This would be a completely different level of funding scheme than we have available, and that would have to come together. And we'll, so that is ahead of us, right? Is like, what is the plan, and then how do we make it as resilient as possible, as easy to maintain as possible? How do we perhaps talk to our partners at the Downtown Association and extend the P-bid potentially, which they just did. They're not doing right now. Nobody tell them that I said that they were going to do that. They're not planning on doing that right now. But, those are the things that have to be worked out to have something like this be successful, because we agree, we put in budget requests to extend our maintenance and have gotten some, but not as much as we should for things like Quick Strike. So I think that's what I wanted to speak to real quickly. And then also, just interestingly, we do have transit signal priority on many of the lines on Santa Clara Street. We also have signal priority for our emergency vehicles. So sometimes the bus will get stopped if there is a fire or a police vehicle. So it just, doesn't work perfectly. But I stole the mic from you, so I'm going to give it back.
Hi, I'm Devin. I work at 10 South Almaden, biking to work every day, so visiting Santa Clara Street a lot. I'm curious, how come you guys, I know it's all very constrained space, so I'm not going to suggest bike lanes, but why no shared bus bike lane? It's a very novel concept, but we are seeing it in certain places where it's feasible. This looks like a great feasible place like that. People already bike on Santa Clara Street. They just do it on the sidewalk and scare a bunch of pedestrians, or they do it on the street and almost get killed by cars. So it seems like a very interesting spot for that.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. As a city, we've really prioritized, as you mentioned, we're trying to achieve a lot within this street. We have decided to prioritize east-west bike investments on the parallel streets, so San Fernando and St. James. That said, I mean, many people in San Francisco or elsewhere where they have the dedicated, red bus lanes, you'll see bikes there. I don't know. We'll need to work through that. I don't know.
I can just personally say, as a cyclist in San Francisco, riding in the bus lanes is terrifying. And that happens on Market Street sometimes in San Francisco, and that's a personal thing with my children. I wouldn't really recommend that. But I see what you're saying, and I think there is an importance of that. But what Eric is saying about the prioritization of north and south of Santa Clara Street right now, I mean, 97 feet, isn't really that much. I'm with you. I'm a cyclist, so I'm like, let's do bikes over everything else. But I think just thinking about what the priorities are and what there's space for. So great comment.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adriana Rothschild. I'm here with VTA's BART Phase 2 program. The program's been coordinating very closely with VTA Transit Ops and the City of San Jose for many years. Wanted to mention a couple of things. One is with regard to maintenance. One of the things that VTA's BART Phase 2 program did as part of our transit-oriented communities playbooks, which included an evaluation of what could be done around the downtown station, was to identify potential funding strategies that go beyond our standard typically used. I know Jessica mentioned, the PBID, not saying that it's going to be extended, but there are a lot of very unique ways that you can leverage development and investment to raise more funding. And that was some of the recommendations that the playbooks provided to the city for consideration as we move forward. So, and then just with regard to bike and ped, bike and bus, that was a big part of the conversation on why ultimately investment was made on San Fernando and buses were moved to Santa Clara to try and provide a better environment for each of those modes, recognizing that there's some real scary challenges with really getting those two types of modes next to each other.
Should we take maybe a couple more minutes and then we'll keep answering questions at the boards, I think.
I'll keep it short. So my name is Haojun. I'm the VTA BPAC rec for San Jose, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself. So me and my wife, we live in West San Carlos Street, and we love to come to downtown for a date. So we go to Scratch for our best fried chicken, right? We go to Punjab Cafe. We go to San Pedro Square, right? We love all the downtown stuff, and then we actually drive to downtown because of how generally not safe it is to bike. And my wife, she's terrified of cars, so she does not want to bike with me. Also because it's cold and she's really a wimpy baby. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So how we do it is that we drive to one of the garages, and then we park our car for free, 90 minutes free, I think, right? And then we walk all along downtown. And then we visit multiple businesses in downtown on Santa Clara Street. We sometimes go to the Broadway, we go to a Broadway show, right? And then on the, I forgot what's it called, Performing Arts Center for Performing Arts. Yeah. There's a couple good shows coming out, by the way. Anyway, so my point is, I really see that these designs are great. But in terms of the bus lane, if you don't have parking next to the bus lane, people are going to double park in the bus lane. That's what we see on 1st Street, 2nd Street. I take the bus to Monterey sometimes to the fairgrounds, and then the 68 never rides in the bus lane on 1st or 2nd Street, just because there's always loading cars loading in the bus lane, and then so I think your intention is great, but once it actually gets implemented, then I don't think that the bus will actually travel in the bus lane. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I personally I really like the designs, but what I feel like is like this is not really reimagining Santa Clara Street. Like it's really more of the same. You still have car travel lanes, you still have a bus lane, which is basically a car travel lane, and then you have parking or loading zones on the side. So I think that if you really want to do something drastic, something that improves downtown experience, for people like me who drive to downtown, visit multiple businesses, and spend the whole night in downtown, it would be great if this space was more prioritized for pedestrians. Something like You can have a car-free Santa Clara Street where you have loading times, right? You have like a center, like a loading zone in the center where businesses can park their delivery trucks in the middle instead of parking the bike lane, right? You can open that. Then you have a lot more real estate to do things like you can put linear parks on both sides of the street, right? You don't have to debate, oh, which businesses are gonna get the better foot traffic, which business is not gonna get a better foot traffic, right? You can even put things like bike lanes if you really want to. I don't really bike on Santa Clara Street, but like I walk on Santa Clara Street all the time. So that's just my 2 cents. I think that you are not really imagining far enough in terms of what you could be done. I'm not saying that this should be implemented today, and I agree with that gentleman. Oh, he left. But I agree with the gentleman that that you have to coordinate it with like density housing. But if you think about 10, 15 years into the future when this is going to get built and people is going to come to Santa Clara Street and actually enjoy downtown, you got to think beyond things like car traffic or through traffic for downtown core. This is downtown core. I'm not talking about beyond 10th Street. I'm talking about from 87 to 10th Street. Yeah, that's just what I think.
It's great. Yeah.
Depending on what you want.
Yeah. One more, or we could take.
Oh, okay.
Somebody.
Hey, everyone. Oh, my name's Samantha Sternstein. I'm a student at SJSU and I live on North 9th and St. James. So I walk everywhere. I don't have a car and I really enjoy that lifestyle. I love walking on Santa Clara every day, but I'm really excited about these new expansions. I, for one, think that it's going to really help our community and especially student life, knowing that I can walk home safe from, the student union and not have to worry about like, oh, getting too dark out or like wondering who's lurking in the background, It's really exciting that we're going to have so many new cool things going on a street that I live literally adjacent to and pass every single day or walk on every single day. So I, for one, am excited. I think you guys are doing great work and thanks again.
All right, thank you. And truly, if you are hungry, we don't have food here. You don't have to feel bad about leaving and going home. But if you want to stay and talk to us, we will stay. And as I think Julie and Eric both encouraged, please use some sticky notes, add some thoughts. That'll help us get your words in your words. And so just appreciate all your time and thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. And just to note,